In today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about circles. To begin with, when we begin to talk about circles, every circle has a middle point or center point. Okay. The distance from the center point to the outside circle is something that's called a radius. Okay. Radius is a distance from the center to the outside line. Now, I sometimes will have a value that will stretch from one side through the center to the other point. It has to go through the center and it has to go to the opposite side of the circle. This is something called the diameter. Well, the diameter is really 2 times the radius because I've got one radius here, another radius here. So it's 2 times the radius, where the radius is going to be half of the distance across the circle. So it's the diameter divided by 2. This will be important when we start talking about the area of circles or what's called the circumference of circles, which is kind of like the perimeter of circles. So when we begin to look at that formula, okay, a circumference is given by a value of pi. For our class this year, pi will be given the value of 3.14, even though it goes on infinitely. Okay, but for our purpose, pi equals 3.14. So our circumference is given by either taking 3.14 and multiplying it by the diameter, or I can take 2 times the radius, which remember is really equivalent to the diameter, and multiply it by pi. So this is the distance if I were to start here and trace the circle around. Okay, it'd be the value around the circle, the outside of the circle. Okay, how long would be the string that starts here, traces all the way around the circle, and ends up back to the end point. The area, on the other hand, is going to represent how much space is this circle taken up. So how much is the area, how much is on the inside of this circle? And that's going to be given by the same value of pi, 3.14, times the radius being squared. So basically what I need to do, is going to take the pi, I'm going to multiply it by the radius and multiply it by the radius. Most times it's easier to do this, the radius times the radius first, and then multiply by the 3.14 afterwards. So let's look at 1 or 2 examples of this. Let's say I'm given a circle. Okay, let's say the radius is equal to 8 inches. So that means from the center to the outside is going to be 8 inches. So when I look at my circumference, what is the distance around the circle, circumventing it in other words? Okay, what's the distance around? I'm going to remember that circumference equals 2 times pi times r, or 2 times, pi times the diameter. Well, if I take 2 times my radius, so 2 times 8 would give me 16, and then I multiply by pi. Okay? And then it's going to be inches is going to be my unit. So in many places we'll leave it at 16 pi as you get older. Okay? But for right now, what I'm going to do is take 16 on my calculator, multiply it by 3.14, or I could do it out by hand as well. And I'm going to get a circumference is going to equal 50.24 inches. Okay. That's going to be my circumference, the distance around my circle. My area, on the other hand, is going to be given by pi times r being squared. Well, so my area is going to be equal to pi times 8 being squared. Well, 8 squared is 64. So area is going to equal 64 times pi. And you'll notice that I always put the number before the pi symbol. It's just sort of the way things are written in math. Okay? So it's 64 pi inches, but since it's an area, it's also going to be squared. Okay? Because I've got 8 inches times 8 inches, so that's why it's inches squared. So then I go to my calculator, 64 times 3.14, and I get an answer of 200 and 96 hundredths square inches. Okay. And that becomes my area. So, walking away from this, these are the two formulas you have to know and have down, okay, and understand. And you also need to understand the distance between radius and diameter. Let's do one more example, where instead of being given the let's say instead of being given the radius, let's say I know that the diameter equals 8 inches. Well, then I need to realize that my radius is really going to be 4 inches. So when I look at my circumference, I might choose to use pi times diameter. In other words, it's going to be 8 pi. So it's going to be 8 times 3.14. Which would give me 25 and 12 hundredths inches. Okay. You notice it's just inches like perimeter was. And then my area is going to be given by pi times r being squared. So in this case, I would need to use the radius of 4. 4 squared is 16 times pi. So then this is going to give me, I'd have to do 16 times 3.14, which would then give me 50.24 square inches for an answer. Okay, so hopefully this will be helpful as we begin to talk a little bit about circles and talk a little bit about different shapes when we put them together.